What would you think if I told you that the women men regret the most are not the loud ones, the pleasing ones, or the ones who stayed? They are the women who loved without losing themselves, who gave but never begged, who opened wide, then walked away when they saw it wasn't mutual. These are the detached women, and for a man who has not met his own depth, losing one is not a heartbreak, it is an awakening. Because you don't forget a woman who didn't need you. Carl Jung would say she is the initiator of his shadow, not because she tried to be, but because her detachment triggered the parts of him he spent a lifetime avoiding. The mask he wears, the ego he defends, the emptiness he hides behind conquest. She doesn't fall for it, not because she's cruel, but because she sees it. And when a man is seen that clearly, it terrifies him. At first he mistakes her detachment for indifference. He assumes she's playing hard to get, that it's a tactic, a phase, but she's not playing. She's present, just not dependent. She feels everything, deeply. But she doesn't let her feelings negotiate her self-worth. She can want you and still walk away. She can love you and still leave. Because her boundaries are not based on emotion, they're based on alignment. And men aren't used to that. They're used to being chased, to being needed, to being forgiven endlessly for showing up half alive and emotionally starved. They're used to women overcompensating, loving harder in the face of withdrawal, bending to hold a connection that was never mutual to begin with. But this woman, she bends for no one, not out of pride, but because she has bent too much before. She's known what it feels like to become a version of herself that only exists to be chosen. And now she chooses differently. She chooses herself. That's what he regrets. Not just the loss of her body, or her presence, or her energy, but the loss of the mirror she held. A mirror that reflected back to him his own chaos, his lack of depth, his inability to meet her in truth. And now that she's gone, now that her silence has replaced her softness, he's left with the echo of who he pretended to be. He remembers the way she didn't flinch when he pulled back, the way she stopped explaining, the way she became quieter, not to punish, but to protect. And in that silence, she became louder than anyone else he's ever known. Because obsession doesn't begin with possession. It begins with what cannot be reclaimed. He may try to replace her, quickly, desperately, even subconsciously. He'll seek her energy in women who give too easily. He'll scroll past photos, entertain surface connections, replay past messages from his curated gallery of attention. But nothing feels like her, because she didn't give herself away the way others do. She didn't collapse into his rhythm. She moved to her own, and if he couldn't match it, she simply kept walking. Carl Jung taught that when we project our unconscious onto another, what we see is not the person, but our unhealed parts seeking recognition. And that is what she became, a projection shattered, not because she failed him, but because she refused to become the fantasy. You see, most men are not prepared to meet a woman rooted in her own identity. She doesn't lean in for validation. She doesn't flinch when affection is withheld. Her love is real, but it's not chasing, it's choosing. And now that she's gone, he realizes the difference. He remembers how she never begged, how her silence felt like absence, but was really a boundary. How she asked questions not to control, but to know, and how his avoidance didn't protect him. It cost him something irreplaceable. Because what he regrets is not just losing her, he regrets not showing up when she gave him the chance. That's the wound. Not the breakup, not the space, but the missed moment, the chance to become more, the chance to meet her as a man, not a performance. And now, long after the messages fade, long after the door has closed, he begins to feel it, not as heartbreak, but as emptiness. Because she didn't just walk away, she withdrew her reflection, and without her he can't see himself clearly anymore. That's what sets her apart. She didn't make him feel desired, she made him feel seen. And that level of visibility, once gone, creates a kind of hunger that no surface connection can feed. Now, every woman who tries to take her place is measured against an unspoken standard, not one of beauty or behavior, but of energy, her groundedness, her refusal to negotiate her peace, her calm in the face of chaos, her ability to stay centered even when everything around her begged her to unravel. That energy stays. Because she wasn't his fantasy, she was his mirror, and when she left, so did the last piece of clarity he had about who he could have been. Not all men regret losing women, but they always regret losing the woman who didn't need them, who loved them in truth. and still let go with grace, because that woman is rare, and rare becomes sacred the moment it's no longer accessible. She may never know the depth of his regret, because he won't always show it. Some men don't cry when they lose a woman like her. They become silent, they distract, they dive into shallow waters, convincing themselves the depth they once touched was a dream. But late at night, when the world quiets and the masks fall, he remembers. He remembers the way her energy didn't chase, the way her absence felt different than anyone else's. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't vengeful, it was clean, precise, peaceful, and that peace is what haunts him. You see, a woman who detaches from love, truly detaches, is not moving from bitterness, she is moving from truth. The truth that her soul is not a project for someone else to complete, that her heart is not a proving ground, that her silence is not passive, it is sacred. Carl Jung called this individuation. When the false self falls away and the authentic self rises, unapologetic, undivided, and whole. That's who she became. Not just a woman who walked away, but a woman who returned to herself. That return is what he regrets witnessing, because while he was busy measuring her against his readiness, she was measuring him against her peace. And when she realized his presence cost more than it offered, she chose the quiet. She chose the unknown. She chose to stand alone in her light rather than stay tethered to someone dimming it. And now that he's ready to show up, now that he's evolved enough to understand what she gave, she's not there. She's not waiting in the wings, holding space for his change. She's not entertaining breadcrumbs, hoping for a meal. She's not watching his stories, hinting, longing, praying. She's moved into a different timeline, one where her energy is no longer accessible to men who only know how to return once they've grown. Because the woman he regrets losing is not the woman who waited for him to get it right. She's the woman who inspired him to become someone who finally could. That's the sting. He didn't just lose her presence. He lost the potential of who he could have been had he chosen her when she was still choosing him. And that realization doesn't leave. It lingers in songs, in scents, in random flashes of memory. The way she looked when she was calm, the way she walked away without rage, the way she made him feel seen and undone at the same time. And now, every love that comes after her feels a little less alive, because she didn't just love him, she reflected him. And when she walked, she took that reflection with her. He'll try to recreate her, piece by piece, in fragments and fantasies. He'll find women who echo her softness, her stillness, her strength. But none of them are her. Because what he lost wasn't just a woman. It was the energy of a woman who had done the work. A woman who knew herself so deeply that she no longer feared solitude, silence, or letting go. And that's what men regret the most, losing the kind of woman who wasn't clinging to love, but offering it, freely, fully, without attachment. The kind of love that doesn't demand, doesn't chase, doesn't manipulate, but still holds power. A power rooted not in control, but in clarity. Carl Jung would say she had integrated her shadow. She no longer needed a man to affirm her worth because she had seen the parts of herself she once disowned. The abandoned girl, the performer, the pleaser, and she had welcomed them home. She became whole. And when a whole woman detaches, not out of fear, not out of pain, but out of alignment, there is no wound to patch, no crack to crawl back through. The door doesn't slam, it simply disappears. He is left standing in a space that once held her presence, now echoing with the sound of what could have been. And that echo is sharp. It cuts through the noise, through the distractions, through the illusions of something better. Because now he knows there was nothing better, there was only the woman who didn't need him, and still chose him, until she didn't. She didn't make a scene, she didn't scream or shame or punish, she just stopped answering, stopped explaining, stopped overgiving. And in that sacred silence he met the consequence of his inconsistency, not as punishment, but as a mirror that now reflects not her loss, but his. You see, when a woman like her walks away, she doesn't leave a mess, she leaves a memory, a vibration, a standard. And that standard becomes the lens through which he sees every woman after her. Not to compare, but to measure how far he's fallen from the version of himself that might have been enough. This is why men regret losing detached women. Not because they need them, but because they miss the chance to become someone worthy of them. And the cruelest part? That woman. The one who held space, who loved cleanly, who left with grace. She's no longer waiting. She's no longer healing from him. She's no longer checking to see if he's grown. She's already gone, already rising, already becoming something even he, in all his memory, can't quite touch anymore, because she's not just detached. She's free. And the woman who frees herself becomes unforgettable. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.